In the heart of the alien kingdom, a once proud princess sat alone in the dimly lit chamber of her palace. Princess Lila, born to lead and destined for greatness, had become a mere shadow of her former self. Her royal blue skin, once vibrant, now appeared dull under the harsh light of the cold, metallic walls. She had once been the epitome of beauty, grace, and power, but now she was crippled, left with scars from a terrible accident that had changed everything. Zilla had been the heir to the throne, admired by her people and respected by foreign leaders. Her strength was legendary, and her beauty unmatched. But all of that was gone in an instant. A deadly attack from a rival alien faction had left her severely wounded, her legs broken beyond repair. The accident had stolen her ability to walk, and with it, her place in the eyes of her people. For days, Zyla had been confined to her room, hidden away from the world. Her father, the king, had promised to protect her, but even he couldn't shield her from the whispers of the palace. The nobles, the warriors, and even the royal guards, the people who had once admired her, now avoided her gaze. Her once admired strength had become a weakness. Her disability made her vulnerable, and in a world where power ruled, weakness was something no one could afford. Zila often overheard conversations in the palace hallways, voices full of pity and scorn. "She'll never be the ruler they wanted," one noble would say. "What use is a crippled princess?" Another would whisper. Each word felt like a dagger to her heart, cutting deeper than any physical wound. The princess had become a symbol of failure, a princess no one wanted. Yet, amid the pain and rejection, Zyla refused to give in to despair. She had always been taught to fight, to rise above any challenge. But now, the challenge seemed impossible. She could no longer stand on her own 2 feet, let alone lead an empire. One afternoon, as Zilla stared out of the palace window, watching the world move on without her, she heard footsteps approaching. The sound was unfamiliar, different from the usual quiet shuffle of palace servants. This was something else, something new. She turned her head slightly, and there, standing in the doorway, was a human soldier. He was tall, with short dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. His uniform was different from the ones worn by the royal guards. He was an outsider, a soldier from Earth, one of the many humans who had been sent to help the kingdom in its time of need. Zilla had heard of the human soldiers, brave and strong, their reputation preceding them wherever they went. But what surprised her most was the way he looked at her. Unlike the others, he didn't seem to pity her. He didn't turn away, as everyone else did. His gaze was steady, calm, and without judgment. "Princess Lila," the soldier said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've been assigned to guard you. I'll be here to make sure you're safe." Zilla blinked, confused by the sudden attention. Guard her? She was no longer the princess everyone admired. She was a burden, someone to be hidden away. But something about the way this human soldier stood in front of her, his eyes meeting hers without fear, stirred something deep within her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zyla felt a flicker of hope. Could it be possible that someone, even a human, could see her as more than just a crippled princess? Could he see beyond the broken body and find the strength she still possessed deep inside? But before she could speak, the soldier added, "And I'll do whatever I can to help you. No one deserves to be forgotten." Zyla's heart skipped a beat. She had been rejected by everyone, her own people, her family, the ones who had once worshipped her. And yet, here was this human, a stranger, offering her something she had longed for. Acceptance. The door closed quietly behind him, and Zilla was left alone with her thoughts. Could this be the start of something new? Could she, the broken princess, find her place again in a world that had cast her aside? Days passed, and Princess Zilla found herself growing more accustomed to the presence of the human soldier, Alex. He was always there, standing at attention, watching over her, but never pushing her. Unlike the others in the palace, Alex didn't treat her like a fragile object to be hidden away. He spoke to her as if she were still the powerful princess she had once been, and that made all the difference. Despite the walls of isolation she had built around herself, Zyla couldn't ignore the subtle change in her own heart. Alex's kindness was unexpected. His respect for her, despite her disability, was something no one had shown in a long time. Each time she looked into his eyes, she felt a strange warmth, something she hadn't felt in years. The bitterness in her heart started to fade, replaced by a flicker of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. One evening, as the sun set over the distant horizon, casting golden light through the palace windows, Alex approached Zyla, his steps quieter than usual. He had always been respectful, but tonight something seemed different. He carried a small box in his hand, carefully hidden behind his back. "Princess Zyla," Alex began, his voice steady, but carrying a note of uncertainty that Zyla hadn't noticed before. "I've been thinking a lot about what's happened to you, and to your people." Zyla raised an eyebrow, curious. "You've been thinking about me?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. It had been a long time since anyone had thought about her, at least not for any reason other than pity. Alex nodded, his eyes locking with hers. "Yes, Your Highness. I've been thinking about how the world has treated you. The rejection, the isolation. I can't imagine what it's like to feel forgotten by your own people." His gaze softened, and he stepped forward slightly. "But I want you to know, you're not alone." The words, simple as they were, struck Zyla deeply. She didn't know why, but hearing them from him made the pain she'd carried for so long feel a little more bearable. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Alex continued. "I've spent my time here watching over you. I've come to understand that you're more than just a princess. You're someone with strength and courage, even if you can't see it right now. And I want to help you find it again." Zyla looked up at him, confused. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" she asked, her voice soft, though tinged with curiosity. It was the first time someone had ever tried to offer her help without asking for something in return. Alex took a deep breath, his expression turning serious. "I can't change what's happened to you. I can't fix the past. But what I can offer you is something that might help you heal, something that might give you a future worth fighting for." He stepped closer, placing the small box in front of her. Zyla looked at it, her heart racing. What was this? Some sort of gesture, a token of pity? But no, there was something different about Alex. She could feel it. The sincerity in his eyes. "Open it," Alex urged gently, his voice quiet but insistent. With trembling hands, Zyla took the box and slowly opened it. Inside was a small, delicate ring. A simple band of silver with a small, shining gem set into it. It wasn't much, but its beauty spoke volumes. She looked up at Alex, confused and a little overwhelmed. "Alex, what is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex's face flushed slightly, but he held her gaze without hesitation. "Princess Zyla, I've spent a long time thinking about this, and I know it's sudden, but I can't help how I feel." He paused for a moment, taking a breath, before speaking the words that made Zyla's heart skip a beat. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice steady, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that Zyla had never expected to see. "I know it's strange. I'm not a prince. I'm just a soldier. But I believe in you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not because of your title, not because of your past, but because of who you are, right here, right now." Zyla's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't been prepared for this. No one ever had been. The thought of marrying someone, after everything that had happened, seemed so far from anything she had ever imagined. She was a broken princess, a symbol of defeat, and yet here was a human, a soldier who saw her for who she truly was, not as a crippled outcast, but as someone worthy of love, of a future. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Her mind raced, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his words. She had been rejected by everyone, her people, her family. Everyone had turned away from her. But Alex, this stranger from another world, was offering her a future she thought was impossible, a future filled with love and acceptance. Zyla's voice faltered, the weight of her emotions making it hard to speak. I don't know what to say. Alex smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. You don't have to answer now. Take your time. But just know that no matter what you decide, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. The princess looked down at the ring in her hand, the weight of the promise it symbolized sinking in. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a spark of something that could heal the deep wounds she had carried for so long. Could she really accept this offer? Could she really trust someone after everything that had happened? But one thing was clear. Alex had given her something she hadn't had in years. The chance to choose her own fate. And that, in itself, was more than she could have ever hoped for. As she met his gaze once again, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something new. Something beautiful, something that would change everything. The question hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, Zyla felt like she had the power to decide. The days following Alex's proposal felt like an eternity to Zyla. The ring remained in her chamber, a constant reminder of the question that had been asked of her, one she was not sure how to answer. Every time she looked at it, she felt a mix of emotions: confusion, fear, and something else. Something that had been buried deep inside her for so long. Hope. It was hard to explain the pull she felt towards Alex. She had spent so many years hidden away, rejected by her own people, that the thought of accepting someone's love felt foreign. She had always been taught that the princess was a symbol of strength, a figure to be admired, not someone who needed help. Yet here was a human soldier, offering her more than just assistance. He was offering his heart. Zyla spent hours in her chamber, staring out at the world beyond the palace walls. She had never felt this way before, vulnerable, uncertain. The weight of the decision seemed unbearable. Could she trust Alex? Could she let go of the life she had known and step into an unknown future? What would her people think? What would her father, the king, say? She had been raised to think of her people first. She was the future of the kingdom, or so she had always been told. But now, with her disability, everything had changed. No one saw her as a leader anymore. She was just the broken princess, discarded by the very people she had once been destined to rule. As she pondered these thoughts, a soft knock at the door broke her concentration. She looked up to see Alex standing there, his face a mix of concern and something else. Hope, perhaps. Princess Zyla, he said gently, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to check on you. You've been so quiet lately, and I'm worried. Zyla glanced at him, her heart pounding. It was strange to see someone care about her like this. No one had in such a long time. She didn't want to admit it, but she found herself relying on his presence more than she had anticipated. I've just been thinking, Zyla replied, her voice soft, betraying the turmoil inside her. About everything. About you. About my life. I don't know what to do anymore. Alex stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers. There was no pity in his gaze, only understanding. I know it's a big decision, he said quietly, but you don't have to make it alone. I'm not asking you to rush. I wanted to let you know that I'm here for you. Whatever you choose, I'll stand by your side. Zyla looked at him, a lump forming in her throat. She had spent so much time hiding away from the world, believing she wasn't worthy of love, of kindness. But Alex saw her, really saw her. Not the broken princess, not the crippled heir to the throne, but Zyla, the woman beneath the scars, the woman who still had dreams, fears, and hopes. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. And it terrified her. I'm not sure I can do this, Zyla whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can trust someone, especially after everything that's happened. What if I fail? What if I'm not the person you think I am? Alex gently cupped her chin, raising her face so that their eyes met. Zyla, he said, his voice low but filled with warmth, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out. I don't expect you to be someone you're not. I just want you to be yourself. And that's enough. The sincerity in his words struck something deep inside her. She had spent so much time trying to be perfect for others, trying to live up to an image of what a princess should be. But Alex didn't want that. He wanted her, just as she was, broken, imperfect, but still worthy of love. Zayla felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had been broken, yes, but that didn't mean she had to stay broken. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a choice. She wasn't trapped by the expectations of her people, by the rejection of her family. She was free to decide what she wanted for herself. She reached out, touching the ring in her hand, the symbol of Alex's proposal. The weight of it felt lighter now, less like a burden and more like a promise of a new beginning, a chance to rebuild her life with someone who believed in her. I don't know what the future holds, Zyla said, her voice trembling but filled with newfound resolve. But I think I'm ready to try. I want to be with you, Alex. Alex's face lit up with a smile, a mixture of relief and joy. He gently took the ring from her hand and slid it onto her finger. You won't regret this, Zyla, he said softly. I promise. For the first time in years, Zyla felt a spark of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. There were still many challenges ahead, but now, for the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing them alone. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to start a new chapter in her life, with Alex by her side. But the question still lingered in the back of her mind. What would happen when the people of her kingdom found out? Would they accept this? Would they understand her decision? Only time would tell. But for now, Zyla knew one thing for sure. She had chosen a future for herself. And for the first time in a long while, that future felt bright. Zyla had thought long and hard about her decision, but even as the days passed, a lingering question remained. What would the people of her kingdom think? They had rejected her when she was broken and weak, seeing her as a shadow of the leader she once was. But this was different. She had chosen a human, a soldier, not a prince. Would they ever accept her choice? The grand hall of the palace felt colder than usual as Zyla sat beside Alex, her hands trembling slightly. The news of their engagement had already begun to spread. Whispers and rumors filled the air like a rising storm. The royal court was gathering, all eyes on her and Alex as they awaited her father's arrival. King Rikus, her father, was a towering figure of strength and authority, revered across the galaxy as a leader who would do anything to protect his kingdom. But Zyla knew that her decision would shake the very foundations of their rule. A human soldier marrying the princess of an alien empire was unheard of. It wasn't just an issue of love. It was an issue of politics, power, and tradition. Zyla's thoughts were interrupted when the doors to the grand hall swung open and her father entered. His sharp gaze swept across the room, his footsteps echoing in the stone hall. The room fell silent, and Zyla felt the weight of the moment press down on her. The king had always been a man of tradition, a man who held the kingdom's honor above all else. What would he say now? King Rikus stopped in front of her, his stern face betraying no emotion. His eyes flickered to Alex, who stood by Zyla's side, his posture straight and respectful. Zyla could feel Alex's nervous energy, though he stood firm. This was the moment that would determine the course of their future together. Father, Zyla began, her voice steady but her heart racing. I've made my decision. Alex and I, we're engaged. We wish to marry. Her father's eyes narrowed, and the silence in the room became oppressive. Zyla could hear her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for his response. Finally, the king spoke, his voice low but powerful. You wish to marry this human. King Rikus's words carried the weight of centuries of tradition, and Zillah could feel the tension in the air. A soldier, not of noble blood, not of our people. Do you truly understand what you are doing, Zillah? Zillah looked her father in the eye, determined not to back down. Yes, father, I do. I understand the consequences, but I've made my choice. Alex sees me for who I am, not just as the princess of this kingdom, but as a person. And he loves me, despite everything that's happened. The king's gaze softened ever so slightly, but his voice remained firm. And what of our people, Zillah? What will they think when they learn that their princess has chosen a human, a foreigner, above the traditions that have kept this empire strong for centuries? What will they say when they see you with a soldier who is not one of us? Zillah's mind raced. She had thought about this. The people of the kingdom had always looked to her as a symbol of strength, a leader to guide them through difficult times. Would they follow her now when she chose someone so different? Father, Zillah said, her voice gaining strength, the people have rejected me for what I cannot change. I may be broken, but that does not mean I am weak. I am still your daughter, and I am still the heir to the throne. Alex has given me something I thought I'd lost. A chance at happiness, a chance to live without fear of rejection. I believe our people will follow us, Father. If they see the love we share, the strength in our bond, they will understand that this is a choice made with the future in mind. For the first time, King Rikus hesitated. His sharp features softened, and he looked down at his daughter. The anger and frustration in his eyes faded, replaced by something more complex. Zillah could see the love he still had for her, buried beneath the weight of tradition. But would he truly accept her choice? There was a long pause, and Zillah feared that her father would reject her entirely. But then he spoke, his voice quieter now. I never thought I would see the day when my daughter, the heir to this throne, would choose a life so unconventional. He looked at Alex, his gaze searching, as if trying to understand the man who had stolen his daughter's heart. But you are right, Zillah. You are still my daughter, and if this is your decision, I will support you, though it will take time for others to understand. Zillah's breath caught in her throat. She had feared rejection, but in this moment, her father's acceptance, albeit cautious, felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it certainly wasn't the easy path, but it was a step forward, a step toward a future she could choose. Alex, who had been silent this entire time, finally spoke. Your Majesty, I promise I will do everything in my power to honor your daughter. I may be a soldier, but I will stand by her side, no matter the challenges we face. King Rikus studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, almost imperceptibly. You have my word. But remember, soldier, this kingdom may be more than you bargained for. Zillah felt a rush of relief as her father turned and left the room, the court slowly returning to their conversations in hushed tones. But the storm wasn't over. She knew that the kingdom's reaction would be far from simple. There would be those who saw her choice as a betrayal, others who would never accept it. But at least for now, she had her father's cautious approval, and Alex's unwavering support. With a soft smile, Alex turned to her. You did it, Zillah. He may not have fully accepted it, but we're one step closer. Zillah nodded, feeling both the weight and freedom of the moment. Yes, but this is just the beginning. We have a long road ahead of us. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it, with Alex by her side. News of Princess Zillah's engagement to a human soldier spread like wildfire across the kingdom, reaching every corner of the empire. The initial shock was followed by whispers, some of disbelief, others of anger, and a few even of curiosity. Zillah knew the road ahead would be far from easy, but she couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Her father had given her his approval, however tentative, and Alex had proven himself loyal to her cause. But even as the weight of the decision pressed down on her, something else was looming. A storm was brewing on the horizon, one that Zillah could feel in her bones. The royal court, the nobles, and the leaders of the factions who had always held power in the empire would not take kindly to a change of this magnitude. The engagement between Zyla and Alex represented a break from centuries of tradition, and change, especially when it came from someone like her, was never welcome in the eyes of those who thrived on maintaining control. In the grand halls of the palace, meetings were being held, not just for matters of the kingdom, but for discussions on how to address the growing unrest. Zyla sat at the table, her heart heavy. The voices around her were louder than usual, with many court officials speaking out against the union. They were all there, the ministers, generals, and ambassadors. All of them had their own opinions about the future of the empire and how her marriage to a human soldier threatened its stability. "We cannot allow this to stand," one of the ministers, Lord Dalros, shouted. "A human marrying the princess. It will weaken our power, weaken our rule. It's unthinkable." Zyla's hand tightened around the edge of the table. She had known this day would come, but hearing these words from her own people stung. She had always been taught that she was meant to represent the empire's strength, that her marriage would secure alliances and bring unity. But Alex wasn't part of any alliance, wasn't a symbol of the empire's dominance. He was just a soldier, a human from a distant planet. "But we cannot ignore the princess's wishes," another voice chimed in. General Varen, a man who had seen much of the galaxy and who had always been sympathetic to Zyla's struggles. "Zyla has made her decision, and it is hers to make. We may not understand it, but we must support her, as a leader of this empire and as a daughter of the kingdom." A murmur of disagreement spread through the room, but General Varen's words held weight. Zyla could feel the tension in the air, but she held her ground. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone, but she also knew that the respect of the court was essential for maintaining peace. "The union will not be accepted by all," Lord Dalros pressed. "The factions, especially the high-ranking military leaders, are already on edge. We cannot afford to risk their loyalty over an outsider." Zyla felt Alex's presence beside her. His quiet confidence reminded her that, despite the challenges, he was standing by her side. He had already proven that, but this was different. They were about to face something that neither of them had anticipated. "I'm not asking for your approval," Zyla said, her voice calm but firm. "But I will not be pushed aside. This is not just about power or tradition. It's about my happiness, my choice. Alex has shown me that there's more to life than titles and bloodlines." Her words silenced the room, and for a moment, Zyla thought she could see the faintest glimmer of respect in the eyes of some of the court officials. But there were others, darker faces, who weren't convinced. The path forward was uncertain, but Zyla refused to let fear dictate her actions. She had already been stripped of everything, her power, her status, and her dignity, by the very people who were now trying to control her future. "Your Highness, with all due respect," Lord Dalros interjected, "you are the future of the kingdom. What will the people think when they see their princess marry a human? The rebels, the factions who are already dissatisfied with your leadership, will see this as a sign of weakness. The stability of the empire is at stake." Zyla's heart pounded, but she didn't look away. This wasn't just about her marriage. It was about the future of her people, the legacy she was meant to uphold. "The people will follow strength," she said quietly. "They will follow me if I show them what true strength means." A silence settled over the room. It wasn't a triumphant silence. It was the kind of quiet before a storm. The tension was palpable, but Zyla had made up her mind. She would fight for her happiness, and she would fight for the future of her people, even if it meant facing opposition from every corner of the empire. As the meeting ended and the court officials left in small groups, murmurs of dissent continued. Zyla and Alex remained seated, the weight of their choices pressing heavily upon them. "Do you think we're ready for what's coming?" Alex asked, his voice low. Zyla looked at him, feeling the familiar sense of warmth that had blossomed between them ever since their first meeting. His presence was a reminder that, no matter how difficult things got, they would face it together. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I do know this. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I'm ready to fight for us. For the future." Alex reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm with you, Zyla. Whatever happens." Zyla nodded, knowing the road ahead would not be easy. The storm was coming, and with it, a battle for their future. But for the first time in years, she felt a surge of hope. She wasn't alone. She had Alex, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the palace doors closed behind them, Zyla couldn't help but think that, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the situation in the kingdom grew more complicated. Princess Zyla's decision to marry Alex, the human soldier, was creating an uproar among the nobility and the military leaders of the empire. The kingdom was fractured, and the voices of dissent were only growing louder. Zyla's father, King Rikus, despite his reluctant approval, was caught in the middle. His authority as ruler was being tested, not just by Zyla's engagement, but by the growing unrest that now gripped the empire. Zyla spent much of her time in the palace, in the privacy of her chambers, surrounded by advisors, generals, and nobles who came to her with concerns about the marriage. There were murmurs of rebellion, talk of factions forming against her, and rumors that some military leaders were already beginning to form alliances to overthrow the king if necessary. It was a delicate situation, and every move she made felt like it could tip the scales one way or another. Alex, by her side through it all, remained a steady presence. He never wavered in his support, even as the pressure mounted. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but his love for Zyla and his commitment to her was unwavering. The two of them were summoned to a private meeting with the king one afternoon. Zyla felt the tension in the air as she entered the royal chambers with Alex by her side. Her father was seated at the long grand table in the center of the room, his face as hard as stone. Despite the tension, there was something about this meeting that Zyla couldn't quite place, an undercurrent of urgency that she hadn't noticed before. "Father," Zyla greeted him, taking her seat beside Alex. "You summoned us." The king nodded slowly, his gaze flickering to Alex for a moment before returning to his daughter. "Yes, I have heard the concerns of the court and the military leaders. There is growing unrest, Zyla. The factions are starting to form, and some of them are openly defying my rule. It's no longer just whispers. There are plans being made in the shadows." Zyla's heart clenched. She had known the resistance was building, but hearing it from her father's mouth made it all the more real. Her decision, her marriage, had stirred something much larger than she had anticipated. She had hoped to change things, but she hadn't realized the full scope of what she was up against. "Is there anything we can do to stop this?" Zyla asked, her voice steady, but betraying the fear she felt deep inside. The king leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "There are things that can be done, yes, but they will require sacrifices. Some of the factions are still loyal to me, but they are growing restless. They will not support this marriage. If you wish to move forward, Zyla, you must understand that there will be consequences. We are facing a civil war in our own kingdom if we do not act swiftly." Zyla's mind raced. A civil war. Her choice had led to this. She hadn't wanted conflict. She had simply wanted to live a life where she could be herself, where she could love the person she had chosen. "What do you propose?" Alex asked, his voice calm, but Zyla could hear the tension there. King Rikus's eyes softened, just for a moment, as he looked at Zyla. "I propose an alliance with the factions who are loyal to us. It's the only way we can solidify your position as the future ruler of this kingdom. We can make concessions, give them power, and perhaps they will accept your marriage. But it will not be without cost." Zyla's heart sank. Concessions. That meant giving up something important, perhaps even her vision for the future of the kingdom. The thought of sacrificing her principles for power made her stomach turn. But what other choice did she have? The people were turning against her. The factions were already gathering their forces. If we don't act now, everything we've worked for will be lost," her father added, his tone firm. "The rebels are already gathering in the outer regions. If they unite, they could bring down the kingdom. This is not just about your marriage, Zyla. It's about the survival of the empire." Zilla glanced at Alex, whose face was unreadable. He had been with her through everything. But this was different. This was a choice between her personal happiness and the future of her kingdom. "What are we supposed to do?" Zyla asked quietly. She was so tired of fighting, tired of being pulled in every direction. But she knew, deep down, that her choice could not be taken back. Alex was her choice, and she would not abandon him now. Alex's voice was steady, unwavering as he turned to King Rikus. "What if we didn't make concessions? What if we fought this fight without giving in? There must be another way." King Rikus looked at him, his gaze cold but not dismissive. "You do not understand the gravity of the situation, soldier. The factions are powerful. We cannot afford to alienate them any further." "I may not be an expert in politics, Your Majesty," Alex replied, his voice calm. "But I know that strength doesn't just come from alliances. It comes from conviction. If the people see that Zilla stands by her choice, stands by what she believes is right, they will follow her. They won't follow fear. Not forever." Zyla could see the fire in Alex's eyes, the same fire that had drawn her to him in the first place. She had always known that he was different from the people around her, but now she saw that his difference could be the key to saving them all. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, King Rikus sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "there is another way, but it will not be easy." Zyla's heart beat faster. She had spent so long being afraid of her own power, of what would happen if she defied the expectations placed on her. But now, with Alex by her side, she felt a strength she had never known before. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time, Zyla felt ready to face it. "We're not backing down," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "I won't let fear control my future. This is my decision, and I will stand by it." Her father studied her for a long moment, his eyes full of unspoken thoughts. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Then we shall fight," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Together." Zyla knew this was just the beginning. The storm was coming, and it would not be easily weathered. But for the first time, she was ready to face it, not alone, but with Alex by her side. Together, they would fight for the future. The days leading up to the battle for the Empire's future felt like an eternity. The pressure was mounting on every side. Princess Zilla and Alex had made their decision. No turning back now. They would not be cowed by the forces of tradition or rebellion. They would face the storm together. But the storm was closer than they'd anticipated. Zilla stood in the palace courtyard, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where dark clouds seemed to gather over the distant mountains. The rebellion was no longer just rumors. Forces loyal to the factions, disgruntled by her marriage to Alex, had already begun their march toward the capital. A full-scale war was on the brink of erupting. Her father, King Rikus, had called all of his remaining loyal troops to defend the kingdom. Zyla had hoped for a peaceful resolution, for an agreement that could unite the people under her leadership. But some things couldn't be undone. Some choices had been made. And now, they were facing the consequences. Alex stood beside her, his face serious as always, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. He had proven time and time again that he would be her rock. But today, the weight of their future felt heavier than ever. "Are you ready?" Zyla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex turned to her, a small but reassuring smile on his lips. "Always, Zyla. You're not alone in this." Zyla felt a surge of strength course through her. He had been with her since the beginning of this journey, since the moment they'd both taken a leap of faith. Now, their faith would be tested like never before. The royal palace was buzzing with activity. Soldiers were gathering in the courtyards, preparing for the inevitable clash. Zyla's heart beat in rhythm with the preparations around her. She had spent her whole life as a princess, trained to rule, to make alliances, to live up to her family's legacy. But now, she wasn't just a princess. She was a leader, a warrior. She was fighting for her life, for Alex, and for the kingdom she wanted to rebuild. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the kingdom, Zyla walked alongside her father, who now looked more worn than she had ever seen him. King Rikus had always been a figure of authority, a ruler to be feared. But today, his weary eyes showed a vulnerability that Zyla hadn't expected. "You've made the right choice, Zyla," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of decisions and regrets. "I've spent my life protecting this kingdom, and now I see that you have the strength to do the same." Zyla didn't respond immediately. Her heart was heavy with the responsibility she now carried. She had known that this moment would come, that she would have to choose between tradition and love, between loyalty to her people and her own desires. But she had never imagined it would be this hard. "I don't want to do this, Father," Zyla said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to see our people divided." The king stopped walking and turned to face her. "I know. But sometimes, to protect what's worth saving, we must face the storms head-on. This war isn't just about your marriage, Zyla. It's about the future of the entire empire. You have to lead now." Zyla looked into her father's eyes and nodded. She understood now. This was no longer just about her. It was about a future that could either be torn apart or built anew. The first wave of rebels had already begun their advance. From her vantage point at the castle, Zyla could see the banners of the rebel factions waving in the distance, their numbers growing with each passing hour. The battle was near. "Are we ready?" Zyla asked, her voice steady now. "We are," her father said, his voice filled with determination. "You will lead them well, Zyla. This is your moment." Alex appeared at her side once again, his expression unreadable, but she could feel the fire inside him. Together, they had come this far. Now together, they would defend everything they had fought for. As the sounds of battle drew closer, Zyla's resolve hardened. The rebellion was at the gates, but she would not be intimidated. She had fought for love, for her future, and now she would fight for her kingdom. Zyla mounted her steed, her armor gleaming in the fading light. With Alex beside her, she led the charge toward the front lines, the sounds of the kingdom's last stand echoing in the distance. The war had come, and it would not be won with just swords and blood. It would be won with the courage to stand by what they believed in. The two armies collided with a deafening roar, the ground shaking under the force of their fury. Zyla's heart raced, but she didn't falter. Alex was by her side, and in that moment, she knew they could face whatever came their way. But the battle was not just for survival, it was for the soul of the empire. Zyla had chosen to fight for the people, to fight for herself, and for the love that had brought them all to this point. She would not back down. She would fight with everything she had, not just for victory, but for the chance at a better future. As the night wore on, the clash of swords, the cries of warriors, and the heavy sound of marching echoed through the kingdom. The fight was fierce, but Zyla fought with a resolve she had never known before. She was no longer just a princess. She was a symbol of hope, of strength, and of the future. The fate of the empire rested in her hands, and she would not let it slip away. By the time the battle ended, the air was thick with the scent of smoke and blood. The dust settled, and the kingdom was forever changed. The rebellion had been crushed, but at what cost? Zyla stood amidst the aftermath, her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. She had made the right choice. She had led her people through the storm, and now she would begin the hard work of rebuilding, not just the kingdom, but a future where love, strength, and courage would reign.